Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
Hello, friend. How are you? Good to be back in the closet with you today.
Yes, on this chilly day. We've got, 12 degrees outside?
Yeah. And for those of y'all that are used to that, bless
you.
Us Texans are not used to that. What do we have? Our 100 million billion degree summer, and so.
I was say, when I was driving over here, there was like nobody out. So 12 degrees hits Texas, and nobody leaves their house because they fear frostbite the second they walk out their front door.
And we were all craving it and begging for it in the summer. We can't wait for winter. Now it's here. We're like, where was that 2,000 degree summer? So it's nice to be nice and warm and cozy chatting with you. It's been a little bit since we've chatted. And I already know what I want to pick your brain about here.
Let's do it then.
So I'm trying to look at this timeline, right? And we're like, what mid-January now? Mm-hmm. Is that where we're at? Almost mid-January? Yeah. And I've been quite frustrated with a lot of people around me, and I'm trying to pinpoint and go, what happened? And like, where has this changed? And I think certainly some of, the things we were talking about last time I was in here was goal setting and stuff like that. So then that naturally makes you reflect on what went well, what didn't go well. And so some of the things that I think I had thought were going well.
Yeah.
And certainly there were lots of things that were going well, but I think then it started making me go, did that really go well? Or do I want to change that or whatever? And then I think the tensions towards the end of the year with relatives and holidays and scheduling and all that. So that certainly added, I think, some fuel to the fire. But to the point where I didn't even know I had a fire. I thought I was just fine. And then suddenly, like, I'm blowing up your phone going, so certainly then, is that me? Is this the Kuba issue? Like, what's going on? And so you and I were just in here having a really good conversation. I feel so much better. So I'm going to narrow this down a little bit here for us.
Perfect.
And I'll go back to, and I think he listens sometimes. And so want to be careful for all parties involved, and be productive and move forward, right? Like be in a productive path. But I'll sum it up as there have been some tensions here lately between me and my dear sweet associate. Y'all got to hear last week, and I'm really proud of him. I was out of town. I was finally able to listen to that episode, and I think he was. I thought he had some really good things to say.
Yes.
I was anxious to listen to him because I didn't know, he's like, oh, my avenue to vent, Kuba, here I come. So I'm grateful. At least if he did say stuff, I didn't catch it. Like
I didn't catch any underhanded remarks, and I felt like it was all useful information.
Yes, it was. He had a very soothing voice. I was like, you're precious.
And I know he was totally out of his comfort zone, but he did a fantastic job.
Yes, so I was very proud of him for all of that. And yet, said gentleman is, we're back at it. We are. We are not really good friends right now. And so I turned to you to say, what happened? Like, we were getting along fine, and right now we are not getting along fine. And so I think the reason I want to talk about this, because in my mind I was like, we always talk about like what latest drama is happening. And that's certainly one of the forefront things in my mind in the drama world. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to talk about that. Air my dirty laundry all over here. But you and I had some good takeaways that can protect both myself and him and really be helpful to our listeners. And so anyway, that's what I want to kind of dive into here. I think if I may just jump straight to, we want to talk about leadership.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what this boils down to is, what kind of leader are you? Mm-hmm. If you do have an associate, or you are an associate looking to partner or own your own, I think you have a lot of clients that are relatively new owners. And I don't think I guess for me, now when you're talking about leadership, it's kind of eye-opening to me to go, it's not like I started my practice going, oh, I'm going to be this kind of leader and this is what I'm going to do. I think I've totally fallen ass backwards into the kind of, and it's taken years to evolve me. And I kind of wish somebody had said at the beginning, kind of going, where do you see yourself? On the flip side, I don't know that I would have known that answer.
Yeah.
So I think it's good conversation to have, and I would certainly say for my associate that I do love. He's got so many great qualities I love about him, that I doubt have really entered his mind going, oh, well, this is kind of leader I want to be. I certainly want to give him that time. The problem is I've already evolved into the leader that I know I am and that I want to be. Do I need another leader like me? I don't know. Or are we constantly going to be butting heads if we're different types of leaders? Probably. So it's almost like I'm needing to push him faster. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that that's going to be, I don't know that that's going to work out for either one of us. Yeah. And it might and it might not. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely an evolving situation for anybody to figure out what kind of leader you are. So all of that to say, I think it would be helpful for us to kind of recap. And I think a lot of us have read about different types of leaders.
Yeah.
But I think us being able to pepper in real world examples here might be more helpful to our listeners than just reading an article or a book about leadership styles.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, starting this episode with the very clear definition that if you are, sometimes even if you're an associate, you are oftentimes a leader without knowing it.
You are. Not even sometimes. You are. You absolutely are. Because to the team and to the parents, you're a leader here. Yeah. You're the doctor.
Yeah.
You are a leader.
Yeah. And especially practice owners, right? So they're, without a doubt, I think any practice owner should assume that there is going to be leadership involved in their role. I think sometimes associates assume that they're not involved in that, and they are. Even if it's just leading in that parent or patient interaction and you're controlling the dynamics in that particular conversation, that's leadership. So to me, I think we've got to start this episode with, no matter the position that you're in, even amongst our team members, that even the lowest person on the totem pole most likely has a sphere of influence in the practice, and they are a leader of that particular domain. So to me, I use leadership very broadly because in my definition, leadership is somebody who has impact. And when we think about it from that definition, like everybody does, positive or negative, almost everybody walks around having some level of impact. And the more impact you have, the more people you have impact over, the more of a leader you grow to become. And so I think part of what's faulty, and maybe even people who would think, leadership, I don't need to listen to that because I'm not a leader. No, you probably are, and you haven't really assumed that role like you should.
And you've got plenty of people that are like, I am the leader. I want to be the leader. This is what I think for my associate, I would say for sure, and I would say even me for years, was like, that's a lot of pressure that I'm making an impact. I don't want to make a positive or a negative impact. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to hide in the shadows and not, because that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
We are.
Even if you're hiding in the shadows, you're making an impact.
Yeah. So then you're having to go, okay, then let me at least have control over my message, my impact, and all of that. And I think if we do dig deeper, I think we all do want to make an impact.
Yeah.
It's why we do what we do. It's why we show up. But the Starbucks barista has impact. Mm-hmm. The cashier at Walmart has impact. So we all have impact. So it's better, I think, that we A, recognize it, B, embrace it, C, think about it. And for a dude, a young dude at that, like the thought of the impact and they're making, and it is different for men and women. I really do think so. And so I think for me, what I was, kind of getting stuck in was going, if I point out some of these things that I don't particularly care for the impact he made in this situation, I think he's going to be like, oh, just an emotional woman. Oh, you're just being a mama bear trying to pick on me. Yeah. Oh, is it your time of the month? Like that's what I'm assuming, that's probably where he's going to be, So I guess to me, I didn't know how to convey a lot of my frustrations at things that I wasn't. Ultimately, what it boils down to is I didn't care for that ripple effect he had with that example. Now, it could be seen as I'm picking on you, or like that's your preference, but that's not my preference. So I think it can get kind of muddy there, and I don't want to get muddy down into like all the nitty gritty examples, because I would dare to say probably 50% I'm correct and he's being a bonehead, and 50% he's correct and I might be being too, dramatic.
Yeah.
I think he views me as dramatic a lot of times.
Yeah. No.
Me dramatic, exactly.
What in the world?
Where would anybody pick up on that? Like, that is so not the impact I make on anyone around me. Right, so anyway, I will quit talking and I will let you jump in, and then I will interrupt you as I do.
Okay, sounds good. So one of the things as we were sitting here talking about your particular leadership style, I do think you mentioned, maybe he doesn't want to be that type of leader, the same type of leader I am. Maybe he has his own idea of leadership. I would say step one, anybody needs to assume that they have some leadership or they have some impact. You just have to assume, whether you're hiding in the shadows or whether you're out in the limelight or anywhere in between, you are making an impact. And that's the first step, is recognizing that. I do think when doctors share a space, like you and your associate, your PRN doctors that come in and help with you, it usually works best. Not that it can't work in other ways, but it usually works best when those leaders function very symbiotically. Not necessarily exactly the same, but similarly to one another. So I'll give you an example. I would say you are what I call a servant leader. So servant leadership is my favorite concept out there. I've read and studied it for many, many years.
Oh, thanks.
I know. And you are it.
Aww.
So servant leadership, to me, all of these leadership styles that we can talk through today, they start with a different mindset. So sometimes the execution could look similar, where the way that you lead might look very similarly to the way somebody else leads, but your mindset could be very different in the process. So a servant leader actually looks at other people. My dad's a servant leader. Y'all have heard him, Dr. Jones, on the podcast. He's absolutely a good example of servant leadership. So he can look at anybody outside himself and see value. You do the same with your team. Like, you want to hear their perspective, each person on your team, whether it's the sterilization tech, right, that you've had helping out through the holidays. I was able to just get to sit down with her. You were able to have some dialogue with her because she's got a perspective that's very valuable. She's worked with you guys on every school break, but it's such a short little snippet of time that we want to know what she sees and how that time went and what she sees could be improved. Or a servant leader wants the sterile tech's opinion on things because we find that there's going to be value in it. There's going to be something to learn from that. I always joke about my dad that I would always be fascinated to listen to his conversations because he would be, let's say the trash truck driver was in the patient chair and my dad's talking to him. I was always floored at how many curious questions my dad had for the trash truck driver. Talking about the routes, talking about what do they do with all that trash, and what do you do for holidays? How do you make up for that? And I'm thinking, how did you even come up with that many questions? Well, it's because he's genuinely curious and he finds value in that trash truck driver because they have a perspective on life and the world that he doesn't have. He hasn't ever been a trash truck driver and probably won't be, and so he has an opportunity to learn. That's a servant leader mindset. It means, yes, I know my calling on this team is to pull us forward in a certain direction. But I'm going to pull us forward by working together with my team, getting in the trenches with my team. I'm not above stepping into sterilization and cleaning up instruments because my team does that. If my team does that, I can do that. I'm willing to step in and be on the ground floor with my team. And by doing that, by connecting with them in a part of their job, I can then better lead them because I'm willing to step into the trenches with them, and there's a respect that's gained there, and we can forge forward together. So it's a very team mentality type leadership, but it comes from a mindset of valuing that person. Even if there's things that frustrate you about the person, doesn't mean you like everybody, but it means that you trust and believe they have a perspective and a vantage point that's very helpful to you so that you can make the best decisions to move forward. And that's what you do. I mean, that is 100% your leadership style. Any comments on that?
No.
Does it sound like you?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think, because I think I do. Was I always that way? I don't know. But I think just me knowing, like, I think I do like to hear what people have to say, because I think when I'm going to make a decision, I want to be informed, because to me, if I'm just making a decision by what works for me, it may not actually be the best decision. To me, it's more efficient, I guess. Yeah. It's not like I'm this noble person who I'm here to serve you and whatever. To me, honestly, it's kind of a function of efficiency, because if I put forth like, hey guys, this is how we're going to confirm appointments. Well, I don't confirm appointments, so this to me makes sense to me on paper. So this is what we're going to do. And then now the front desk team, 3 weeks later, I come across something like, oh, this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. Well, yeah, that's because that's the protocol you put in place. Well, why didn't y'all tell me this? Well, you didn't ask me that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was a waste of time. One example I distinctly remember, I mean, this is 18 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it was. But when I was an associate, finished residency, maybe been out a year, I don't know. And I felt kind of bad because they had been apparently in negotiations with, so the owner had been working with their Burkhart rep, and they were going to change all of their systems to like this cassette system and whatever they were going to do. And me, new kid on the block, came in, and he happened to ask me, he's like, oh, well, this or that. I'm like, I don't get it. And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, albeit I've only been like an assistant, I was an assistant for a couple of years temping, but I was like, I don't get how that's going to be safer or more effective. In fact, I think it's going to cost you more. And I was like, but what do I know? And so I kind of gave him my example. Well, he was like, oh, you're right. And then it comes out the assistants were like, yeah, she's kind of right. But they hadn't, like maybe he didn't ask their opinion, or maybe if he did, he only asked certain questions. So they only answered those questions, like whatever.
Yeah.
But apparently this had been going on for months, and like estimates and this and trying to figure all that out. And I'm like, I don't get it. I don't really understand why we need to do this. And apparently, I remember him and like the lead assistant pausing and just looking at me. And I was like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble, whatever. And I'm like, well, I just really don't get why we're reinventing the wheel. Like, why are we doing this? And they didn't really have an answer at that point.
Right.
Because whatever reason they were, could it have been the rep going, hey, this is what everybody's switching to, and y'all need this and whatever. And I was like, honestly, dude, in dental school, that was a pain in the ass because of this. And in these offices that I've assisted in, I've seen it and I don't like it there and I like this better. But I mean, I'm the new one here. I've been here less than 6 months. Y'all do whatever you're doing. What do I know?
Yeah.
And I cost that rep probably, I don't know, $7,000-8,000 worth of like equipment he was just about to buy, and that wasn't my intention.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, I honestly didn't know enough to know. All I was doing was saying, well, like from my assistant experience being an assistant, like, I don't think this can do a hell of beans of whatever you're wanting it to do, and you're spending all this money and I'm not really getting it, right? So I think all of that experience then for me was, I think the servant leader model is not me being a good person. It's being an efficient person.
Yes.
Because I'm like, like the sterile tech will have some good feedback. She has something valuable to say. The truck driver in the chair has something valuable to say about my paperwork systems and how hard it was to schedule and why they chose my office versus somebody else's office. And it's because it fit with their truck route schedule. So to me, it's about efficiency more than anything else. I'd love to say it's because I'm a great person, but I think it's really more about...
To me, you want to pick a leadership style that is the most effective and efficient. And a servant leader model takes time, and there's a certain mentality that you really do have to have. But your desired result is a certain outcome. So just because you're a servant leader doesn't mean that you're so involved in the trenches that you're not coming up for air and looking at where we're at in the battle. It means you're at the forefront of that. So there's a book that Simon Sinek is one of my favorite speakers, teachers.
How do you spell that?
S-I-N-E-K. S-I-N-E-K. So Simon Sinek. And he wrote a book pretty recently called Leaders Eat Last. Leaders Eat Last. And so it's the whole concept of servant leadership. And it is absolutely an effective leadership model. He actually goes into the Air Force and how they, the leaders in the squadron serves all of the troops first, and then they actually sit down at the very last to eat. And basically what happens is there's this loyalty that begins to be built on teams because those squadron troops keep looking at their leader and how he always puts himself last or she always puts herself last, and they respect that. There's this respect that starts to grow of, wow, they've got my best interest in mind. And once there's that connection of I am loyal to that person to the death, I mean, right? In those circumstances, we're talking about I will put myself in front of that man's body to save him or her. If that leadership model works in that extreme circumstance, imagine the type of loyalty that can be built amongst a dental team because they've got a leader that, number one, truly values them as a person, values their perspective that they have, and does actually do things that serves and takes care of them. One of the meetings we had a few months ago, your team called you Mama Bear because you're always making sure that everybody's okay, and that can be seen by other leadership styles as frivolous, useless. Who needs to do that? But you've got a team that's very loyal to you, and that is an efficient model because then when push comes to shove and you need to make maybe a drastic decision or a big picture decision that maybe isn't well accepted among your team, you're going to have your core people that have seen you through all of this, and they're like, I got her back no matter what. And yes, we as a team will follow her on this. We are getting behind her and we're moving forward. So they're kind of the first adopters of things that you want to push out, which makes it very effective because then the change happens on your team that you need. And so it is very efficient, very effective. And the great thing about it is it really is a win-win-win type model that everybody feels good in that model. So not only is it effective and efficient, but it's a feel-good model.
So then if the person listening is going, but I don't value you, or I don't know how to value you because it's not my go-to, or, now I feel like a crappy leader because that's not what I do, or flip side, oh, I absolutely do. I do value my team and I do take their input, but then we're like, no, you don't. Like, would your team say that about you? Any advice for those people?
Yeah. So I would say, in all honesty, very few people are servant leaders. I will be real honest on that. So I think it's good in theory, and I think a lot of people would love to ascribe to be that type of person, but I think it is much harder to do because of the mindset. So let's just take it from kind of a general intelligence standpoint, right? So you've got a doctor in a team, and there's nobody amongst that team that has the same level of education as the doctor. You maybe have a hygienist on the team, which they have their own skill set, but in all honesty, they're not trained like the doctors are trained. They haven't gone to that many years of schooling and have had to go to the depths that a doctor has had to go to. So from an intelligence standpoint, if we were looking at the hardcore facts, the doctor is the most trained and technically should be seen as the most intelligent person in the room in that team. And I think it's very hard for a doctor to turn that off, so to speak, and humble themselves enough to go, that person is intelligent. They may not be trained in the way that I'm trained, but they have a life experience. They have an experience in that role. They have their own perspective that is very valuable. And that does take, in some instances, it takes a switching off of, I'm the smartest person in the room, and that willingness to go, I'm a normal person just like everybody else. Yes, my schooling is different, and yes, I'm going to see things from a certain perspective, which is very helpful, but so does Sally at the front. She has a perspective that is also helpful, and I think very few doctors are able to do that. And I think because of that, they do miss out on perspectives that are helpful.
What do you do about that then?
So either you say, I'm never going to do that, and I've got to find a leadership model that works for me, which we can talk about a couple different types, and that's fine. There are other leadership styles. You could there's, I don't know how many leadership styles total there are, 16, 20, something like that. There's a ton of leadership styles that you can assume that will fit with you and will work. So not everybody has to be a servant leader. There's not just one model. It's my favorite model, and I think it's the most effective, but there are other leadership models. So if people that are listening to this are like, yeah, I'm always gonna have judgment for the person, I'm always gonna think, they thought that because they've only got a high school education, so they don't know any better. I can't tell you how many times I hear that. And again, there is some truth to that at times, but it shouldn't change the fact that we truly value that person and value their feedback, even if they're only high school educated. But there are other leadership models that work, and you need to find one that works for you. So that's option number one. Option number two is to start practicing humility in certain situations. So maybe that starts with, I do this a lot with my kids. I want their perspective. Why would I want my 12-year-old daughter's perspective? I'm 43. I have lived life. I don't need her perspective on anything. And yet, I take these moments to just pause. What's your thoughts on that? How would you do that differently? What is your perception, right? Because I want to hear from her. And do I gain things from that? I can't tell you how many times I do.
I was about to say, and I love, if nothing else, just the humor it brings, like hearing their perspective. I'm loving my kids' ages right now. I mean,
Yeah.
they're tweens, so I won't say I love it all the time, but I really do love what they have to say and why they thought that or what they're going to do about it. It's entertaining.
Yes.
And I always learn something too.
Yep. So starting with something as simple as that, and sure, we may talk to our kids and think that they're funny and cute, but to actually listen for the sake of learning something. And I think if we just find situations to practice a humble mindset where we can kind of set our ego aside and go, I want to learn something here. And then just keep adding people. Okay, I did that with my daughter. Now I'm going to try that with Sally at the front. I want to just sit with her, ask her perspective on things, her opinion on things. Find a patient that you're like, I have nothing in common, but I'm going to ask curious questions. You may not be good at coming up with curious questions. Prepare them. Okay, I'm seeing the sanitation driver tomorrow, and I'm going to prepare questions that I'm going to ask. So find pockets of opportunity to just practice that humble mindset. And I think if we'll truly give it a chance, we'll be so surprised at the outcome, so enthralled with the process of learning that it could potentially shift us into the direction of a servant leader. So those would be the two things. Either decide there ain't no way I'm going to be a servant leader and find a model that works for you, or start practicing that humble mindset in various situations.
It's funny you say that because I'm thinking of a particular colleague that I'm like, I'm betting you anything he considers himself a servant leader. But he is certainly not one. And I think to him, a servant leader is, oh, I'm open at odd hours to serve my patients. Oh, I go to church and I give free advice, or I gave a toothbrush donation. I'm a servant leader. So it's just funny, like, to me, where I'm,
Yep.
it's a mindset for sure. And
It is 100%. It really is. All of these different leadership models come from a particular mindset, and this one has a true value in people. No matter how weak, young, inexperienced, that we inherently either, we just naturally believe this. I think that my dad's just one of these people, just naturally has always liked and appreciated everybody. Like, as long as I can remember, he's been that type of person. So I think he just came by it honestly. But then I think there are people out there that have just decided, like, I have this value for people, and there's a respect and an appreciation that goes into that. That's really cool. And I think, I mean, that's my consulting model is that way. I was just talking with somebody and I told them, like, I don't step in to any practice with answers. I have no answers for you until I sit with your team. And when I hear their perspective, their feedback, their thoughts, your perspective and your thoughts, then I can have some answers for you. But I will not tell you anything about your practice until I've talked with your team, because that vantage point is so important to me from a consulting standpoint.
well, it's funny you say too, like, I think I'm like your dad. It's not like I went, I'm going to be a servant leader. Like, I don't know. I think for me, where it's come from is kind of the underdog mentality.
Yeah.
Like middle kid, immigrant kid, middle, and going, I hope somebody, you know, because I don't look fancy. I don't talk fancy. So I'm like, I think throughout my life, I have probably been kind of cast aside a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I wish somebody asked my opinion on that, or I wish, you know, and so for me, it's more of the underdog going, you know, I see you over there and you're not the popular kid, or you are the one that doesn't look like the smartest, but I know you've got something to say.
Yes.
Because that was me.
Yes.
In the corner.
Yes.
Going, oh, I'm, you know, and so I think that's where it's come from me to go, I know everybody has something valuable to say.
Yeah. And to me, that is, you're right. I feel like life situations can lead us in that direction. And I feel like some of the wisest, smartest people I know have this mindset because they're always learning. They've never arrived. They never would walk into a room and view themselves as the smartest in the room. Never. Even though I think they are. I say that about you all the time. I'm like, she's so freaking bright, but she's never going to step into a room and be like, I own this place. Like, I have got all of you scored. You're going to walk in and assume that you're going to learn something from everybody in there.
I'm just grateful to be entering the room. I'm grateful somebody opened the door and let me in. So, like, I'm here. I better not blow it.
Oh my gosh,
and get myself kicked out of here. You know? Okay, so that's the servant leader. What else you got?
So, well, this is where I would say, where you and I were talking about you and your associate having some friction that's kind of developed over these last few weeks. I think it comes down to leadership. That you whether you've come by it honestly or however you've arrived at this, you have a servant leadership mindset. And I am wondering, as we've been talking about your associate, if he views himself as a leader. Does he view himself as having impact? Has he thought about himself as a leader? And likely not, right? Because he's still young in his career. He's still, figuring things out.
Well, it's one of the things we've loved about him, right? Like, he doesn't have a big ego.
Yeah.
He's very much, very easy to be around, very confrontational, seems very open to absorbing and learning and growing and watching.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, but how did we get to this point then where now we're butting heads?
Yeah. And I think it comes down to those expectations that, which again, thankfully you guys have some good communication time. I know you'll be getting something on the books here soon, but where you will be able to share it from this vantage point. Because I think you're expecting a certain type of an awareness about the impact that he has. With little decisions, big decisions, you want him to have a respect and appreciation for the impact that he's going to have in that moment. And I think he's trying to accomplish his role in the practice in a very certain way. He's trying to do a good job for you, but I don't think he's viewing himself as a leader and as having impact. And I think you're recognizing that there's maybe a disconnect there, that you're expecting things out of him from a leadership standpoint, and even just an awareness that his actions have impact. And I think that's where the disconnect is happening. So I think that can easily happen on any team, especially with a practice owner and an associate, where there's these expectations that associate, I think, oftentimes steps in and assumes that they don't have impact. Oh, I'm just an associate. I'm just here putting my head down, doing a really good job, getting the job done, doing good dentistry, and then I'm going to go home. That's why many long-time associates are like, I've always wanted to be an associate because I just want to check out and go home. And I think sometimes they can forget about the impact that they have in every little interaction with a team member, with a patient, out in the community as they're representing the practice. There's a sphere of influence that they have, and they need to recognize that and then hone into that. Okay, well, what type of impact do I want to have? And that should then trickle down to every little minor decision that they make.
So then 2 comments there. I think number 1, I think that may be where a switch has maybe kind of flipped a little bit, because if he was the associate that was coming in, leaving at the end of the day, doing a good job, doing all that, check. I mean, he's nailing all of that. The problem is what he said in the last podcast is that he is looking to say, like, am I joining you long term, or what are you doing? And so now I'm looking at him in a different light.
Yeah.
And he, that's where I think I've gotten, turned the fire up on him, and he's like, what happening?
Happened?
Like, yeah. And without even realizing that that's what I was doing. But I'm like, whoa. You've kind of put a timeline on me now, and I gotta see if I can figure out, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, it's taken me years to evolve.
Yeah.
And he needs that time too, but yet he's kind of put a timeline on me.
Yeah. And
now I've got to go, are you going to be the kind of leader I need in the office? But nobody knows that yet. Yeah. He's got to kind of go through that. But I think that's where
you're trying
this friction's coming on.
Speed it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second comment I'm going to make is, you just said he and I are going to get something on the books, but I think, can you get it on the books? You just nailed it. You nailed it. Whatever you just said about 2 minutes ago, you nailed it. How about you meet with him and tell him this, just whatever you said. Here, you could even hit play and mouth it back. Like, let's get back. There you go, buddy.
Like the foreign subtitles, I will be totally off. I will not be able to duplicate.
Yes,
so.
Please take it. Please.
Well, and I would say all that to say, leadership is absolutely a topic. Associate, Sweet Sally at the front, practice owner, we all have a sphere of influence, and we really do need to think about what type of impact we're wanting to leave in each of those situations, and we need to think about it sooner. I would say any associate stepping into the practice, the assumption should be, I am a leader in this practice. I am leaving my impact in some way, so what type of leader am I going to be?
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.